Well, hello everyone. Welcome to Getting Started with Thinkorswim. My name is Barbara Armstrong. I am happy to have the opportunity to fill in for Mr. Cameron May today. Um, Today we're going to talk about the Monitor tab. So whether you're a stock investor and you have a weekly or a monthly routine where you like to check your positions, or you're somebody who looks at the market and trades frequently, the Monitor tab is a page that you're going to want to become intimately familiar with. And this is one of my favorite things to talk about. When I first learned how to trade, somebody had recorded a session like this, and it was like backup replay, backup replay. It was just packed with so much helpful information. I absolutely loved it. So I hope that you can find this to be a helpful resource also. If you are not following me on X, consider this your formal invitation at Barb Armstrong CS. We also have Brett Crowther with us in the chat today, and you'll want to follow him as well at Brett Crowther CS. So just know we are going to look at a lot of different positions today and a lot of different stocks on the Paper Money software application on the Thinkorswim desktop platform. But know that all of the things that we're going to discuss today are for example purposes only, none of it to be construed as a recommendation to trade any particular stock in any particular way. And again, we're using the desktop platform on Paper Money, and that's a brilliant place to learn and hone your skills prior to, trading in your live account. Okay. So this class is taught in about an 8-week rotation, and then Cameron will sometimes throw in some bonus sessions before he goes back to the beginning. Last week we covered downloading and navigating Thinkorswim. And we also kind of did a little overview of most of these tabs. So today we're going to focus on the Monitor tab. So let's get right out to the platform. And here's our Monitor tab. So, and we can see that one, we're in Paper Money because it says up here, PM for Paper Money Simulated Trading. And then we're on the Monitor tab in our activities and positions. And so one of the things that I really love about this is that we can customize it and make it look however we want. And last week, we had a couple of positions. Actually, let me just close this for now. And I'm going to use this drawing tool because what I want to show will be kind of overshadowed. So we created something called Buy a Car. And we created a group called Paris for Christmas. And we were just kind of making stuff up. But let's pretend that I have bought a car and I don't need this anymore. And so I want to get rid of this group. And typically people might set things up where they have a group for their stocks that pay a dividend. And then you'll notice here that we can customize by coming to this sprocket. We can customize the columns in the group. So one of the columns we added was a column for dividend yield. We also added a column for net liquidating value. And I'll show you how we can do that. And then you might want to have a group for stocks that you bought, that are trend trading growth stocks, or stocks where you're doing a shorter term trade. Stocks with a target. And, when we talked about this last week, we just said maybe you, anticipate maintaining most of your portfolio for growth and you want to let it grow over the long term, but maybe you're retired. And so you'd like this portfolio to generate some income that you can withdraw. And so maybe your growth and dividend stocks you intend to hold for the longer term, but these stocks with targets, maybe that's funding, when we just moved, I showed you how to move positions. We created this Paris for Christmas. We might say, well, that's kind of silly. We know stocks with targets is our shorter term income generating trades. And so I'm going to put those back in the stocks with targets. So how do we do all of that? So if we look at our buy a car, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take our position and say we no longer want it to be in that group. we want to move that to our back to the stock with target group. And so you can now see that that position got moved and it's now down here in our stocks with a target group. And then if I say I don't really need this column anymore, or this group, I'm going to come and just say, I just want to delete this group. And if we want to continue with this theme, you might say, well, you know, it was Paris for Christmas. I think I'd rather go at Thanksgiving. We could rename the group if we want. And so when we hit rename, we're just coming over to those three little lines. We can change this and say, well, we want it to be Paris for Thanksgiving instead. Or maybe you just want to say, like, this is my, who wants to go to Paris? I'd like to go to Costa Rica, or, you know, whatever. You know, it's just a point of, we can delete a group. We can change the name of a group. We can also move the group. So you might say, I want to move it so it's right beside the stocks with targets. So then I could come up here to these three little lines and say, I want you to move that down. And then we can say, move it down again. And so now we've got our Paris for Thanksgiving right beside our stocks with targets. Now, if we want to customize a group, how do we do that? And one of the things you might want to add, you know, that we've added down here is sector. And I didn't even know that we could add sector as a group. I think I learned that from James Boyd. We can also add notes as a group, which might come in handy if you have stocks with targets. You know, then we can click on this note and say, oh, this is a swing target. And we also did a long call example trade that we're going to compare when, you know, everything's said and done. This was a target based on a Fibonacci extension. And this is just a note you put in from yourself to yourself. Now, how do you customize these groups? Well, if we come to our stocks growth group and then come down to this little sprocket, whenever there's a sprocket, it means you have the opportunity to customize. We've already added net liquidating value, but if we wanted to add notes, we could add that as a group. Just come down here and hit add. And if we wanted to add sector, we could come down and add sector. And then if you're saying, well, I'd really like sector, I want net liquidating and profit PL percentage to be the last two columns. So I'm going to move this sector up to here. And I'm going to move notes up as well. So you can rearrange these. So now we can see that we've got sector. You might say, you know, I don't need this column to be so big. So if I make this a bit smaller, then, you know, if I want to make sector bigger, I can just click and drag to make columns bigger or smaller. Okay. So, you know, that's a handy feature also. And then again, we can just click on notes. Now, some people might say, like, I don't really want to take up space here. I want to keep this clean. If we decide we don't want that column in there, we can just come in and click notes and say, yeah, thanks for the offer, but no thanks. And we can eliminate it. So and once you have customized a group, when you log out and log back in again, it will be there, but you have to customize each individual group. So if you create a new group, and you know, so if we chose VLO here, and we said we want to move it to a group and we don't have a group, like maybe we want to create our groups by sector. And so you want to name this group energy stocks. So you'll see when this group first comes up, it's really, this is the default. There's a profit and loss percentage, but it has days, which is days to expiration. Well, if this is just a simple stock position, we don't need that. So we can then come to our sprocket and delete days because we don't need that. And maybe we want to add net liquidating value. We know the sector, so we don't want to put sector in there. You know, and if we just, maybe we want to, I thought I added net liquidating value. You do have to hit the add, click on it, add, and then okay. And now we have our net liquidating value. So that's a bit about groups, how to create a group, how to move a position from one group to another. We've covered how to delete a group, how to rename it, how to customize the columns, and how to move groups around. So there's a lot of flexibility there. Well, what if you say, you know I had a position on Starbucks. Like, I don't see a position on Starbucks in my account anymore. We could come to account statement. And what I've done is I've just typed in Starbucks, and it's like, I know I did a trade on Starbucks this year. And so we can see back on February 3rd, we bought 250 shares of Starbucks for $92.87, and we sold it on March 11th for $101.51. So if you wanted to calculate your profit, you can just do some simple math, subtract 92.87, from 101.51, multiply by 250, and you'd see how much you made. And you might say, well, I wonder why we decided to get out on March 11th. And we can't see notes in the trade history, but if we come up to the order history, notes show up as a default here. And so we can see that, we had a target on this of 101.50, which the stock hit and filled. So we got out at, 1 penny higher than that target. And we had a stop loss order in at the same time. So this is called an OCO order. This order got filled. This order got canceled. When I come over here to swing, and click on the notes, said, oh, this was a swing target. And I like to mark things on the chart. So on this one, we bought it on this day, we sold it on this day, and this was a swing target based on, it coming up and hitting this high here. And turned out it did go up and hit this target. Now, it didn't stay up there long. So if we hadn't put a stop in and, you'd been out golfing or skiing or walking your dog that day and not looking at the markets, you might have missed getting out when you wanted to. Okay, but this is another place that we can see a note. Okay. Yes, I am a visual learner. I will say that. Yes. Yeah, Wacky Whack is saying net liquidating value, mind blown. Like, I'm telling you, when I first watched my first recording of, something on the monitor tab, my mind was blown 6 ways to Sunday. Okay, so let's say you're looking at your positions, and let's go and look at Target. So let's say you're on your charts and you're looking at Target, and I'm doing my weekly review of all my positions. Or maybe I've been traveling for a few weeks and I haven't looked at Target lately. I put in a target on Target at 127. That may have been a mistake. I may have meant for that target to be 126, but this is showing on the chart where my target and my stop loss is. Like, what kind of magic is that? How did I do that? Well, you just come to your sprocket and say show orders. So you see, if I unclick that, then the orders aren't showing. And this is just a handy way to be able to check your stop loss orders if you're doing a weekly review of stock positions to see where your stops are and should you move them up. And so you might be saying to yourself, like, why is my stop so low? Well, one of the things we can do is click and drag, but we're talking about the monitor tab today. So if we say, well, I have this example trading plan that says if the stock closes below the 30-day moving average, which it did 2 trading days ago on Monday, I'm going to move my stop up to 3% below the low of that day. Well, that would be 113.84. So we're going to come back to the monitor tab, and we are going to come to our working orders. And one thing about working orders, you can sort them by the time you place the trade. So the last one we placed, the one that's still in here, the oldest one, is actually target. But you can also, I tend to sort by symbol. So I can just scroll down alphabetically and say, okay, my stop loss was at 104.20. I want to cancel and replace that order. And instead of it being 104.20, I want to move it up to 113.84. 113.84. Confirm and send. So we're placing that stop. And then when we come back to target, we can see that the stop has now been moved up. Okay. Now, what if you're reviewing your positions and as part of your weekly review, you're looking at things and you're going, well, there's a little chiclet, I think they look like chiclets, which means that there's an exit position, or maybe if you put in a conditional order, maybe it's an order to enter a position that hasn't filled yet. But with Intel, there's like ding qua qua. We've got nothing. There's no little chiclet. And so sometimes it could be that the stop loss is showing somewhere else. So if you come up to your working orders and you say, okay, is there a stop in place for INTC? There is not. So now, because if there was a stop, it would be in your working orders and it's not there. So then we might want to come up to the chart and look at Intel and say, okay, we placed the trade on this day. This is where it's now trading. Where might we want to put a stop? And so we might say, well, here was the previous high, it broke out. It could pull back, but if we use this 54 as a potential support level, and it gapped up here. So, the bottom of where it gapped from or where it started, that can be a support level also. So maybe we create a stop around 53.35. And so we're going to come to our monitor tab, and then we can just right click on this position and say, create a closing order with a stop. So this is going to be a stop loss order. Now, just because the default, by the way, will also be $1 lower than where it's currently trading. Just that's what the system does. Now, because we're putting a stop loss order in, does it guarantee that we'll get out at that time, at that exact price? No, because if the stock gap down, we could be out at a lower price, and we'll want to make this good till canceled. So we're going to make that 53.35. And so now when we send that in and come back to Intel, we can see that we have a stop in place. And what we're attempting to do is protect some of the profit that we've gained, yet leaving it enough wiggle room to perhaps pull back a little and not get stopped out. Somebody's saying, would this be a good opportunity for a buy right covered call? Well, if you were placing a new trade, yes. So a buy right covered call is a trade where you both buy the stock and sell the covered call at the same time. So some might consider that to be an entry because we've had like a 1-day pullback and it could be moving again to the upside. Yeah. Or we could just sell a covered call if you're okay with selling the stock. Okay. So we've covered that. We've covered stops. Okay, working orders. Well, I want to come over, I have 2 demo accounts. And in our trading a smaller account, we do a lot of option trades. And so you'll notice here that it says vertical and then it does the math. So on this long call vertical, we bought it for 260. It's currently trading for 325. And one of the things, our example trading plan on this is that, if it goes up by 50%, we want to exit. But, this isn't a default. So in order to make that happen, you come to your position statement, the very top one, and this adjusts it for all groups. So you want to come to arrange positions. And if you don't have order clicked, the default is trade time. And so now you see that it like we placed a vertical trade, but it doesn't show vertical and it doesn't do the math for us. The same on Corteva. We know that we're down because it says here we're down by $73. But if you want them to be sorted, which I kind of love, like I don't want to do any more math than I have to do, because every time I have to do the math, there's the potential for error. And the other thing I really like, because these have percentage trade targets, I really like having that profit and loss percentage. Now you'll notice that on these, I didn't put in net liquidating value, because that one isn't as relevant, where, in the stock positions, geez, our stock with targets aren't doing so well. I do want to have net liquidating value because I want to be reminded at a glance if I'm over my 5,000 cap on this trade. Okay. I just want to have a quick look. I just want to have a quick look at the questions. I must have missed how you customize columns for a group. You just go to any group and then hit this sprocket. And then you're customizing the columns just for that group. So for example, I think the only group that we have theta in is our iron condor group, because we're really looking to take advantage of time decay. And so we have theta in that group. And we have profit and loss percentage. We don't have net liquidating value. We don't care as much about that. Okay, so I think that's a really nice feature, is that you can organize these things by group. Okay. Net liquidating value. Okay, so to switch from your paper money to your live account, let me see if I have another one open here. I do not, but what you can do is just go, once you're logged into one, you can go and log into a second one. And what I recommend is that you can come up here to setup. If you want to have both open so that you can toggle between them. Sorry, I'm so used to importing things. If you come to setup and then you want to come to look and feel, application settings, look and feel, you might want to make one, if you have one light, you might want to make the other one dark. So that when you go from one to the other, you aren't placing some trade that you think you're placing in your paper money, when in fact you're placing it in your live account. But you can go in and open two. And if you're struggling with that, you can always call Schwab and they will walk you through it. But and then you can toggle. It's a little different between Apple, between a Mac and a PC, but you can do it. You can do it on both. And what I encourage you to do is change. And if you're saying, well, I find the dark a little bit too dark to look look at all day if we come back to that look and feel. Another thing you can do, it's not as in your face and as striking, but you could come then to your sprocket and come to appearance and at least change the color of the background on your charts so that you know that gray is paper and pink is, your live account or whatever you want it to be. Okay. Now, if you're having trouble customizing, um, you may be in all accounts. And if you're in all accounts, there's most of what I've gone over you can't do. You have to pick an account. Because if you're trying to create a group, they have to know which account it's going into. And you can have very different groups, in one account versus another. Yeah. This is getting started with Thinkorswim. So I don't know. We'll discuss the game plan for an INTC trade if we had a trade in place. So with this, well, INTC, this was, I believe, one where we had put a target. Or we may have just bought this as a growth stock. We're up very nicely on it. We're up 50% on this in our paper money account. Okay. So you might say like, hey, this has reached a high and could be pulling back. Some people over earnings will say, hey, you know what? Earnings is coming up. And you can have this show on your charts as well. With earnings coming up, I want to take the stop and replace it with a protective put to avoid potentially getting nicked out on a wick. And others might say, I'm up nicely here. I'm going to take the money and run. But this really isn't a trading strategy class. This is a class where we're discussing, the monitor tab and how to set things up. Now, if you have an order that's been canceled, and you can see, I had canceled the INTC order just so that we could look at one. This one we canceled and replaced because we had the old stop at 104.20 and we moved the new stop to 113. Okay. And so you can see orders that have been canceled. You can see orders that have been filled. So in this account, we've had no orders filled today or hit targets. But let's say you've been gone for a week. And this I will often do in our trading a smaller account class. I'll come to the account statement and I'll say, just show me what has happened for the last 5 days. Now, I had Starbucks in here, but if we take Starbucks out, we'll have more examples in this account. So we can see here, we've opened all these positions. The only position we've closed in the last 5 days is KMI. And then we opened a position on NVIDIA. We did one on AMD, one on CoreWeave, and one on Fly. But, if you've been traveling and you haven't been placing new positions, like the following, when I did that search last week, it came up with 6 positions that had hit targets or exits. So then I know what I want to review. And for you as an active trader, if you were somewhere where you weren't accessing your account and wanted to see what happened, here's a quick way to be able to see what's happened. And then you can see in order history, it said you have, 16 working orders, 5 were filled. So, these are the 5 that were filled and that you had 2 that were canceled. And so my guess is one of the ones that was canceled was, KMI may have had an OCO order in and that got canceled. But you can click on this and then you can organize these. Well, actually, I don't. These sort by date. So then you can just come down here to say, okay, what got canceled? Oh, we had an order on Apple that got canceled, and we had one on KMI. And which ones are still working? Here we go. Now, one thing, in the current positions, when you look at working orders, you can sort by date, you can sort, by symbol, etc. Well, guys, that is what I had to share with you today. On notes, another place to access current notes would be, in your working orders if you don't want to have it on your charts. So in our trading a smaller account, we often will place, both a stock trade and an option trade to be able to compare them. And I'll put that in the notes to remember to compare them when we exit a position. But for your, use, you may say, well, I'm putting this note in because I want to know why I'm placing this target. And this target is based on a double bottom pattern. It might be a swing trade or a 1 ATR target or whatever it may be. This is just a note from you to you that only you see. And where you put these trades in, like let's say you wanted to do a buy right on INTC because your expectation is that it's going to continue to go up. And I'm not suggesting this, but if you wanted to see how to add that note, we could come and for this one, we're just going to buy 100 shares of stock. We can put a note in here, to add a covered call. So you can put your note in anywhere and then in here, and then it'll show up, you can add it as a column on your chart. You can see it in your working orders, all of that. So guys, that's what I had for you today on the monitor tab. I appreciate you being with me. I hope that you'll come back next week. Cameron will be back and he'll continue on with the series. He always has lots of great insights to share. If you haven't already seen the rest of this series, you can subscribe to the channel, go to Trader Talks from schwabcoaching.com. And when you come over, let me just show you where this is. When you first come here, what it will show you is what's currently being taught. And then if you come to playlists and scroll down, most of the getting started classes are listed kind of at the bottom here. So there's getting started with Thinkorswim is right here. Today, it's the very last one. There's also, if you're new, there's a getting started with technical analysis, a getting started with options. There's a class that's dedicated for new people on getting started with stock investing. And then I created a playlist here called the Trade Management Mini Sessions. And if you go to that, you can scroll to the very bottom. And I've done a bunch of short videos that range from like 7 to 12 minutes long. There's, a 10-minute version or a 12-minute version, which on Thinkorswim charts. There's one on creating watch lists, on OCO orders, and then I've got one here on the monitor tab as well. So lots of information for you to access. So hit the like button. It helps move things up in the trading algorithms. Don't forget to follow Brett and I in the land of X, Brett Crowther CS, Barb Armstrong CS, and subscribe to the channel. Have a really great day, everyone. We'll see you soon. Up next is trading index options with Mr. Ben Watson.